So I just unmuted over here. I started recording, so that's it, right? Okay. Light attendance today, at least in person and on staff. So they're smiling. So I'm guessing that they can, people online can hear me. So welcome all of you to our stakeholder meeting on our proposed building, plumbing, and RCO rules. I see a lot of familiar faces, so I think many of you are probably already familiar with our process. But just to kind of remind you that this is about a conversation, opportunity to ask questions, you know, as we are still just working and developing these proposed rules. I'm Regina Hanschel, for those of you who maybe not know me, but I think all of you do. Executive Secretary for the board, and joining me is Jay Richards, Construction Code Administrator. And online we have Rob Johnson and Bruce Colbert, who are Assistant Construction Codes Administrators. Yeah. So just, or in person. Just as I normally do before to kick off these stakeholder meetings, I just like to do a little formal statement of kind of what the process will look like and what we can expect as we are going through this rule development process. The board is conducting this stakeholder meeting as part of the Common Sense Initiative Business Regulation Impact process to provide information on proposed rules and respond to questions from interested persons prior to formal rule filing. After review of all comments submitted in writing and at today's meeting, the board will incorporate any approved changes as a result of the comments and document the reasons for the changes in the business regulatory impact analysis. The revised rules and the business regulatory impact analysis will then be filed with the CSI office for review and recommendation and resent to stakeholders via e-notification. After receipt of the CSI office recommendations, the board will determine whether to move forward with formal rule filing. If the board does determine to formally file these rules as revised, the board will also conduct a regular public hearing prior to their adoption as required by Revised Code Chapter 119. This is kind of a quick summary of what these rules are going to be doing. In the building code, we propose to adopt amendments to the Ohio Building Code to coordinate with statutory changes for type A and B daycares, reinstate language for consumer fireworks, add provisions for boathouses, add provisions for single exit 4-story group R4 buildings, and update selected reference standards additions to make other editorial corrections and changes. In the plumbing code, we propose to add the definitions to coordinate with other rule amendments, add provisions for wash fountains, add new section for water-powered sump pumps, modify bacteriological examination to include testing for MMO, MUG, and Legionella bacterium, add exceptions for AABs, add new requirements for grease interceptors, and provisions for calculating fats, oils, and grease discharge, and make other editorial corrections and changes. And finally, in the RCO, we're proposing this rule package to comply with our 5-year rule review, which includes both no rules, no change rules, and amendments. These are provisions included in that package is to coordinate administrative provisions with the Ohio Building Code, update definitions, add provisions for boathouses, incorporate provisions from appendices for tiny houses, ADUs, and patio covers, bring in IRC provisions for electrical and plumbing modified to coordinate with existing Ohio changes to model code documents, and to make other editorial corrections and changes. So I'm going to hand it over to Jay and Bruce to chime in as needed to walk us through the rules. Most everyone is online today, so you feel free to drop any questions in the chat or raise your hand. We will take questions as we go through, or you can wait. We're going to go through the building code, then we're going to do the plumbing code, and then we're going to do the RCO at the end.
I'll wait for Regina to get ready. She's gonna share her screen.
I should be already shared.
It's not. Is it shared? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll start in the OBC. These are going to be amendments, mostly clearing stuff up, and with a couple of exceptions, and we'll kind of try and highlight those. The first things are real easy. 102.3. We're just updating some titles. Children and youth and mental health and addiction services. Those are other agencies that have changed their names in statute, so we're catching up in our rule. In 102.10, there's the standard, the National Electric Code standard had changed their location of definitions, and we did not pick that up everywhere. So that's what this little change is about, that the term is defined in 100, and it's associated with Article 682.
And Brian, are you angle?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Then we go to, there's no more changes in the OBC in Chapter 1. We go to Chapter 2 definitions.
You guys get there.
Yep. Trust me, I know.
I know you've been doing this part lately. At least did for.
Yeah. We're almost there.
Before we leave chapter 1,
Okay.
let's talk a little bit about 106.5
Okay.
and 114.
All right. The board staff is working on section 106.5 and correspondingly 114, because they're kind of hooked together in a lot of ways. But we are working on trying to give some clarity and provide some guidance through the rule to building officials about how to apply, engage, and use 106.5. We're going to talk about it as, instead of alternative engineered design, compliance by alternative design. And then
Bringing in some more model code IBC provisions that provide more guidance about kind of like expectation for the process for alternative design.
yeah, and potentially introducing the use of the performance code in some of its foundational understandings. So
It's just the language is not quite ready, but I just want to make sure everyone that's here today expect to see some language related to this when these rules are sent back out for additional stakeholder input. And so I want to flag that for everyone to review when that time comes.
Yeah.
Same thing with 114. As Jay said, that they're kind of tied together. We feel like it's time to maybe simplify 114 and provide better kind of guidance about what is alternative design and what is something that goes through 114 product approval process. Right now, it seems to be a little bit mixed. We would provide better clarity in that. So just a heads up too, again, for everyone, be aware that in the next, when you see these rules come back out, there'll be proposed changes in both of those sections.
yeah, and they may look significantly different.
Yes. What rule are we going to go to first?
Boathouse definition, so boathouse, boat well. So these definitions are brought in because of an investigation that the board staff did relative to a potential conflict on the RCO side. We felt that there was value here, and because of what these structures are, they need to start off in the OBC, and we determined that there was a good opportunity to be able to do what another community was already doing and find a way to use the RCO for construction criteria on the dwelling unit part of a boathouse. So that has to come through the OBC, and we need some definitions to be able to do that. So boathouse, that's describing what it is, where it's applicable, and then the part of the boathouse where the boat is actually stored, boat well. The other two definitions that we have are coordinating with statutory changes relative to what we used to refer to as family daycares type A and family daycares type B. Now they're referred to as child care homes. And note the numbers have changed. They have increased the sizes allowed under those licenses from 7 to 8 and 12 to 14. And type Bs are 1 and they go up to 7. So be aware of those physical changes, but the rules regulating family childcare homes still stay the same. You go through the inspection checklist, and that gets provided to the operator. They submit it to children and youth as part of their application. And that's the only real authority that the building departments have, is completing that checklist relative to the type A's. So in essence, nothing changes other than the size that's allowed and the name that's used. Chapter 3. Again, we've in 305.2, we update the child care reference instead of daycare. In 310.4.3, this is where we have placed the regulation that allows a boathouse to use the RCO. And you'll notice that 310.4.3 is about mixed use under the residential occupancies. Keep going.
Hey,
Or
Jay,
not.
you had a comment from Charles in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah. So a house with a single family dwelling.
You mean, so a boathouse?
Oh, yeah. So, yes, because well, it's, if it's only one, it's still an RCO. You have to connect 4 or more to jump into the OBC. So the OBC is going to start with 4 or more. The RCO is still going to address 1, 2, and 3. Okay.
And we
Got
it. Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Coordinating language in RCO, which will be discussed.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
There's language in the RCO to deal with the boathouses as well. Good. So where am I here? This 410.4.3 is mixed use.
I'm sorry, where were we going?
4.3 up to, I was looking at the chart for the charging paragraph. Yeah, well, so it's dwelling units and mixed occupancy buildings. We felt like that was the best place to park this because we're defining these as the boathouses that have 4 or more essentially boat wells as part of the process. And they have a dwelling unit or some use like that associated with the boathouse. And provided they meet the conditions below, essentially the boathouse complies with the S2 parking garage or Group U private garage requirements. The boat well has a rate of rise heat detector that is powered up by premises wiring with battery backup. And the boat well is separated from the dwelling unit with 1 hour fire resistance rated construction. And the boathouse is not used for repair garage, fuel dispensing facility, or is classified as group H occupancy. They can use the residential code of Ohio for construction criteria on the dwelling side of the boathouse. So on where people are using it to live, sleep, eat, cook, take a bath, that can comply with the RCO, but it's still regulated by a commercial building department. Okay. Just like we do with multifamily row houses that are all connected together, right? Alternative compliance. Same concept. Okay. I think that deals with that. 415.10.5.1. There you go. So we had eliminated some consumer fireworks provisions out of the OBC when we adopted it for 24. There was some mishap in communication with the fire official, with the fire marshal's office, and they failed to pick these provisions up. They're needing these provisions, and we were the fastest way to get these provisions back available. So we are putting these provisions back in. Ultimately, as code development goes, these provisions should end up over in the Ohio Fire Code, and they will not remain in the building code, because fireworks is the one part of the code that is statutorily given deference to the fire marshal's rules over our rules. So those are provisions that you've seen before. If you go back to the 2017 OBC, they're in there, slightly different structure, but they're all still there. You guys, building code will do these relative to consumer fireworks.
Code has his hand up.
Yeah.
Has the state fire and the fire code just came out, but have they given an indication of a timeline that they would reopen rules to pull these in?
They have not given a timeline, although I sat in fire council yesterday. They know they have an amendments group that comes out, but right now they have some other priorities ahead of that, like the Ohio State Fair. and so they're going to work on that. And then probably late summer, early fall, they'll have an amendments group out. I would look for it in the fall to have that out for comment.
Since we are talking about the fire code, maybe now is a good time to address maybe some of the comments that were submitted. I think, Mark, you're here. You want to talk about the
Got his hand raised.
Fire code coordination. And also you wanted to talk about sprinklers and open parking garages.
Yes, and can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Can you scroll up just to the paragraph before this, the section right before this? Yeah, here it says this code and the fire code. And in other places in the code, it actually says the international fire code, such as in the swimming pool section. And in section 101.4.5 fire prevention, it talks about the provisions of the Ohio Fire Code, and shall be used, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a little confusing. Like when this says fire code here, you mentioned the Ohio Fire Code, but that's the 2025 Ohio Fire Code still is not a reference standard, correct?
No, it is. You'll
is?
find it in chapter 35, right at the top, where it talks about Ohio Administrative Code, and we have Fire Code, and it references the Ohio Administrative Code sections.
Okay.
Jay, did we just do that last fall? Did we just bring that back in last fall with that amendments group?
No, I thought it was, I'm fairly certain it was in there before.
Yeah, we just don't reference the addition. We reference the
Like we
Ohio.
always do with.
Yeah.
We just reference Ohio Administrative Code
So it's whatever's current.
1301.7 in whatever's current.
Yes.
So when
I thought maybe we took it out when we were just for the first edition.
no,
But you also have to go down to the ICC section and the reference standards chapter to note that we also reference the 2021 IFC for all sections except chapter 12, and then the 2024 IFC for chapter 12.
but that's where we reference the International Fire Code in the body of the OBC.
Correct.
Where we have Fire Code, that is Ohio Administrative Code reference.
And Mark, to give you some background, you may have heard us bring this up before. With the 2024 Ohio Building Code, we knew that there would be a lag between our code adoption and the Ohio Fire Code adoption. And we didn't want to have that disjointed, we referencing over to the Ohio Fire Code with an older edition based off of the 2015 code. So that's why
We needed requirements out of the 21 IFC to make our code enforcement complete.
And so that was when that decision was made because of that particular issue. Since then, we are leaning towards keeping it, I know because this was your question, to continue to reference the International Fire Code, unless we want to make sure that there's something specific in the Ohio Fire Code, like when it comes to fireworks, to make sure we're using that edition. Because Again, so we don't ever have to worry about that coordination issue. And we only use the Ohio provisions when, when it's applicable.
And what we'll try to do is amend the Ohio Building Code to say either Ohio Fire Code or Fire Code, like it has in this section. That's the Ohio Administrative Code reference. Otherwise, it'll stay model code language and reference the International Fire Code.
Okay.
And then also one last thing too is I do know the Ohio Building Officials Association asked me about this a couple months ago at one of their meetings. They were asking, are we going to, change that coordination? I answered the same way, is no, we intended to continue to reference the IFC. But I did tell them at that time, and I'm letting you know too, we want to know if that's causing problems. I mean, if there's an incident where we need to make sure that we're better coordinating with the Ohio provision, please just provide that feedback. So we can get that cleaned up.
And
Okay.
and like one of the things that happened when the Ohio Fire Code came out, and Bruce was alluding to it, they adopted a different edition of Chapter 12. They went to the 24 IFC as the basis for Chapter 12 in the Fire Code, and we tried to match that in our code. So Chapter 12 of the International Fire Code is using the 24 edition, not the 21 edition. And that shows up in Chapter 35. And that's what Bruce was referencing. So that was our coordination with what this fire marshal is doing relative to the Ohio Fire Code.
Okay.
Should we talk about garages now, or we till Chapter 10?
I think Mark has another.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, for the parking garages, just wanted to give a heads up. We actually have an appeals hearing tomorrow on this. And the Columbus Fire Chief is the one that, is involved because it's in their code, the Ohio Fire Code. They enforce the 48,000 square feet that for open parking garages. And when sprinklers are required, that section was removed from the Ohio Building Code. And so there's a direct conflict there. And I just wanted to just bring it up, say, has anyone proposed bringing that language back in? Because it's that item 3 and 903.2.10. It's in
Right.
the International Building Code, but Ohio took it out. But now the Ohio Fire Code still has it in there. So, it's making things difficult.
So, yes, we are aware. If you maybe remember with our 2024 Ohio Building Code, well, prior to that, we had some long-standing conflicts between the fire code and the building code. The board at that time actually modified a lot of provisions in the building code to eliminate those conflicts and to coordinate with the fire code. But this provision, which was new, was the board felt like it was important that they wanted to keep that, remove that from the IBC. And we had conversations with the fire marshal about that. They were fully aware that we were going to do so. But again, they have different policy objectives and they chose to keep the IFC language. So we recognize that there's a conflict. We understand that that has an impact on owners, but the board is here to write a building code that, they feel is appropriate for Ohio. And at this time, they want to keep that not include that IFDC language.
Yeah. And that language is applicable to open parking garages only.
There was significant discussion about it at the board. So it was not a decision that was not taken lightly. So.
Okay. Thank you.
We have Coda and Amit.
I'll go to Amit. I'm going to guess his comments more germane here.
Yeah. Amit?
Thank you, Coda. Thank you, Jay and Regina. And I think this is where people complain to you, Regina, because they wanted me to write an adjudication order so that they could appeal the sprinklering decision. And I had to tell them that I cannot adjudicate this because it's not in the OBC. And they waited. They were not happy with that answer.
Yeah, they have to, it's being enforced by fire officials through the fire code. So their orders need to come through those rules. And they have an appeals process for that. It happens to go to BBA. So
Was it a delay issue, Amit, that caused it is because they couldn't get an appeal through you? They had to wait for the fire official didn't issue the order? And it would
Yes.
cause delay? Okay,
Yes,
okay.
does Columbus Fire participate in plan review?
yes. And they go before the OBBA. It's all squared away now. But, even though people's minds, if they're going to the Board of Building Appeals, the building department should give them an education.
So we have an education issue, a training issue.
Yes,
No, I appreciate that information, Amit. And yeah, I mean, just like what I mentioned previously, is as you guys are experiencing issues with this, we'll certainly provide that feedback to the board. But I understand where that, it's not that they were concerned, that it just caused the delay because of just how the orders had to be issued.
yes.
Okay.
Coda?
For where we call out the fire code and then IFC, would it be possible without going through rulemaking to add notes like we do in 11.12.11 for accessibility signs, essentially user notes inside the code?
And what are you thinking? I would say.
Something along the lines like where we have fire code, they could go back to the definition to figure out whether or not we're talking about Ohio Fire Code or International Fire Code, but something explicit as, for this chapter, the fire code means the Ohio Fire Code or something along the lines.
What's in our rule of construction right now?
It is right. I mean, but I think he's just wanting to have an informational note where they're in there.
Folks who aren't versed with the book.
Yeah, because some of them show up in scope. Because like underground storage tanks go to the fire code because we don't have authority. They're exempt.
Specific to say.
And we're specifically there. This is another one, consumer fireworks. We're sending them to the fire code. And then the other one is storage tanks of flammable and combustibles that aren't attached to building services. And that's outside of it doesn't get triggered by our building code. So.
I know, I made a note for your note, Coda. So, we'll take a look at it and think about that and where we have some value.
It might be best placed in chapter 34 in the ICC table, just calling them go back to the definition if we don't want to change code text.
34 or 35?
Sorry, 35.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I think we also do the rule of construction up in chapter 1.
Yep.
Oh,
This is a frequent question that we're getting internally for a BOA. Folks trying to figure out which code applies, even though I think it's in the code, but.
Okay, the comment that's posted is related to the plumbing code. We'll get back to that.
Thanks.
All right.
You also have a comment from Charles in chat.
It's down there at the bottom.
Unfortunately, Jan's retired, right, Charles? So that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for the reminder there. I've heard much about that as well. I think at that time too, there was proposed Board of Building and Fire Standards, which has not come to pass either. So.
Hey, Mike, I see you're needing to leave at some point. Are you going to be around?
Oh, I thought he was joining later. Is that what it was? He wanted to talk now?
Well, he wanted to share before he left. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, okay. Mike, you wanted to talk about the plumbing code before you have to take off. That's fine.
You're on mute if you're talking with us.
I think oh. I think he just was talking about the what he posted.
Yep, and he posted his testimony.
Yeah. All right. So we'll continue with the OBC then. 429 is the next section. It's just coordination. It got published a little different than the rule, and we're just catching the rule up to what was published. There's no content there. Capitalization change. 1006.3.4 single story. So the board is proposing to adopt what's coming in the IBC with the 27 edition and extending single-story buildings from 3 stories to 4 stories. And this is bringing forward that language into the OBC. So you'll see that we move from 3 stories to 4 stories. 5 stories and above are not being considered at this time with this rule package. I will say that the board is still working on 5 and 6 story, but we're not ready to put a rule package out. I think we're still looking potentially for some more comments. So the table is one, and then there are conditions under 1006.3.4.2 for the single story building that goes up to 4 stories.
And this is just the same as it's going to be in the 2027 IBC.
Yes. Yep. And then we move to 35. All the rest of it is just changing outline numbers. So in chapter 35,
There's
the code update is that they changed the Ohio administrative reference to :7-7-01 to 7-7-80, which our 1301:7-1 to :7-7 is out of date. And so we want to bring that coordination forward, but that is the fire code reference there, Ohio Administrative Code. Then 318 ACI. We're going to the 25 edition of 318. There are a couple of concerns about going to that edition. It solves a bunch of problems that the previous edition created, but there's still some unanswered questions, and there are currently some code cases in front of ACI. And those code cases will be instrumental in keeping 318, the 25 edition,
it solves the problem.
solves the problems. Thank you. So when those code cases get resolved, that will become part of this reference. That's also a discussion that we're having about. We will probably pick certain reference standards that will allow the ongoing modifications that are made, like ACI does code cases. If we're going to allow subsequent code cases in the case of ACI, or subsequent TIAs in the case of UL, I think it is, we will make that known here in chapter 35.
With the ACI standard, just so just for those of you who probably be interested when this is adopted, was given a very detailed presentation on the changes that are going into this newer edition of the ACI standard. And it's going to be some certain benefit to building owners. So I guess they're limiting where there would be previously required to over design. So I do believe that it sounds like this is going to be potentially result in certainly some cost savings for building owners.
Yep. We're adding NFPA 1124, the 22 edition, that deals with fireworks. The next one, UL, go down to UL. We have UL 217. So this is dealing with, I think everybody on here is familiar with the multiple technologies that Ohio had in their residential code, and the fact that the fire or the smoke alarm manufacturers, their standard no longer deals with those two distinct technologies. So getting smoke alarms that are labeled in that way to comply with our RCO rules and consequently the OBC rules are becoming difficult, if not impossible. So updating the 2017 standard gets us into the newer technologies and how these smoke alarms are being labeled. They use different processes to basically detect the same kinds of fires. So in our discussions with the petitioners or the folks that were pushing this forward several code cycles ago, comfortable with where the technology is today. So this is just updating, and you'll see in the RCO, we're getting rid of the dual technology requirement with the new standard. 2200 to 2020, this is stationary engine-driven generators. Again, UL has expanded the standard to include some things like walk-in enclosures, weather-resistant enclosures, base tanks that are just base tanks that are structural, all kinds of stuff like that. It starts moving those things that we were looking at as buildings into pieces of equipment. And so that really changes the how they're viewed by building departments, as well as the industrialized unit industry. So if they have proper listings in accordance with 2200, 2020, that's the third edition, to have evaluated the walk-in enclosure, to have evaluated the base tank as structural or non-structural, their listing will go a long way to helping building departments enforce these as pieces of equipment that are attached to building services.
For any of you that have data centers coming into your jurisdiction, or if you're pros, this is I think an important thing to flag for future, because this came to our attention as a result of like a large installation of generators being installed and associated with a data center. So yeah, just want to kind of keep that on your radar.
Yeah.
Real quick, we might need to circle back to the 4-story thing. I think there's a question in the chat about Senate Bill 428.
For 428 is what's being proposed by that bill is asking the board to write rules for up to 6-story. So this would be an incremental incorporation of what that bill is asking the board to do. As JRE indicated, we also are looking at 5 and 6-story, and independent of what 428 is, potentially would require the board to do if adopted. So we've been working on in single exit up to 6-story for quite a while now. And so, like I said, if 428 would be adopted, again, this 4-story would kind of have a portion of compliance with that, but also we would continue to work on the 5 and 6-story, which would have, as we're currently developing, would have some significant additional conditions to be able to have a single exit in a 5 or 6-story. That would exceed what 428 is currently proposed, but that's something we would certainly be wanting to work with sponsor when that time comes.
The only other thing left was clarifying that NFPA 75 and UL 2085 are not reference standards within the OBC. However, they have been useful, particularly like in engine-driven generators and some other above-ground storage tank stuff. And so we put them in there as non-reference standards. That concludes the amendments to the OBC. If anybody.
Over to plumbing code, I did want to mention that Coda, who is with us, has submitted a written comment asking for some kind of coordinated language with definitions that we've been working on. So I just want to make sure that everyone was aware that we're going to be reviewing that comment. And I just want to check before there's any additional comments before we move on the building code, before we move to the plumbing code. For those with us or single in-person guests, Brian?
Oh.
You're good? Ready for plumbing code?
Ready for plumbing?
Okay. I don't think anyone's opting out. Okay.
Yeah. So when it comes to the plumbing code, the largest amount of comment that we've had, as well as most of the changes, are related to the grease interceptor amendments. But
pause when we do this.
I think we can. I don't know that there's really any need to discuss anything but grease interceptors in here. Because we have two definitions.
Let's walk through. Yeah,
Okay, we have two definitions. So the two definitions that are not related to grease interceptors are private and public utilization. I'll clear these out of the way. And then we can go back to. So private is simplifying it to anything that's not defined as public. And then on public and public utilization, it's basically applies to fixtures that are in the area that has unrestricted exposure to walk-in traffic. So if it's not public, it's private, and apply the rules accordingly. Thought that was a lot simpler way to deal with public and private. Then the only other change I was going to reference was the changes dealing with 301.6, and that's the sump in the elevator. And essentially, we've gone back to language that everybody's used to, that you're not.
Chapter 3.
That's in chapter 3.
Before we get into everything else.
Okay.
Do
we? So all the other definitions that are added are related to the grease interceptor stuff and trying to get you what you need. 301.6. So we're deleting the phrase to comply with section 1003.4, which is sending you out to grease and oil oil interceptors. And this is relative to the elevator pits. So there is no requirement now to provide an oil interceptor for the sumps coming out of the elevator pit. That's consistent with our BBS memo. That's consistent with how we've had the rule
and how I think it's intended, and I think just this language has caused confusion. So.
Yeah.
Definitions.
Yeah. So peak flow rate, calculated peak flow rate. So this is one definition that comes in as part of the code change. I'll lay the foundation. The all the grease interceptor language is part of a code change proposal that went through the 2027 code cycle. It has made it all the way through. We are going to see this language in the 2027 IPC. So at some point, this language is going to be the basis for as a model code for our rules.
If we adopt.
If it does go a long way to laying a common understanding, a common protocol. It might even be described as some design basics for how you size these systems and how you look at these systems. But there seems to be a lot of confusion out there on the design side and the enforcement side about what's actually required. This lays a base point or a baseline to be able to talk about that and do that. I believe that's the intention of the code change. It starts with some definitions. So you need to know that. Then there's design service interval. This is about after it's all in there, you got to keep these things maintained so they operate properly. Then there's fast food, quick service restaurant, and full service restaurants. So those are two different food service types, and they produce grease in different quantities and different amounts. So, and you need definitions for those too. So fast food, quick service restaurant, and full service restaurant. Then there's non-domestic wastewater. And then there's peak flow rate. Again, all tied to this. Those are the definitions that get brought in as part of that code change proposal.
We'll go to the main proposal for that then.
Yeah, that's all down in 1003.
Sorry, we're going to be jumping around a lot since we're trying to keep things on the same topic. Okay.
Yeah. So 1003. Oh. Pardon all the underlines here, because I believe this is because of the amount of rule change that we have. We had to rescind the old rule and adopt this entire rule new. So the entire rule is underlined. This stuff is not new. We have to go to 1003.1. So here's where we start picking up those grease interceptor rules. Now, this particular section, it's a relocation of section 1003.3.4. So 1003.1.1 is not new. It's just in a new location. Several of these are 1003.2.1. Again, it is relocated and renumbered. The previous section was 1003.3.8. 1003.2.2, again, is a relocated, renumbered section 1003.9. So there's nothing new. 1003.3. This is just a coordination because we changed the location of stuff. So we're doing that. 1003.3.4, we located the relief provision for grease interceptors associated with dwelling units or private living quarters as an exception under 1003.1. 1003.3.5, again, is a renumbered, relocated section. The previous section was 1003.3.4. In 1003.3.5.1 is mostly a relocation, but there is a slight modification. And unfortunately, I'm not remembering the slight modification. 1003. The table, again, is relocated because of the number change. 3.3.5.2, again, renumbered, relocated. 1003.3.6, again, renumbered, relocated. 1003.3.7, again, renumbered, relocated. However, we are adding new sections 1003.3.7 through 3.7.7, and that all goes to calculating the meals per day design criteria as one of the starting points for establishing how much oils, greases, and fats are generated by this occupancy relative to the size of the grease interceptor. And I know
Yeah, I think, I know that, our in-person guests have some questions, comments related to this, and then, I'll turn it to our, online guests. And I know that Mike Miller posted his, written comments too in the chat. So
Mhm.
And Mr. Miller's comments were regarding this as well?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Oh.
Yeah.
This is informal. It's kind of more like a
Yeah,
conversation.
go ahead, Brian.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, so my name is Brian Bellis and I represent Franklin County Public Health. I'm the chief plumbing inspector over there, but I actually work for my chief building official, who is Joe Mazzola, the commissioner. So in our health districts, we're structured a little bit differently, but long story short, I do represent Franklin County Public Health. So I just kind of want to frame the comments because I think all of the work that goes in to our code changes is kind of amazing. I've always loved being a part of it. I started in public sector at City of Columbus in 1997 and have been doing it ever since then, although for 2 different agencies. So I love the process and I think what's being done here is great. We do have some concerns and we appreciate the opportunity to share the viewpoint of public health in regards to what we're going to talk about in this change. So I'm going to open myself up to be corrected at any point along the way, but basically starting with the table that.
I figured that's where you were going. Table.
Yeah, the table that is up on your screen right now. It actually, our comments are going to start a little bit before that with the meals per day. And then I would like to
That's 7.
quickly progress into the table and then into the bigger philosophy. So you have to understand that public health has a vested interest in food service establishments. Sanitarians have always had the responsibility of inspecting restaurants, any kind of food service operations. So we are intimately knowledgeable with these operations and some of the things that we look at in regards to food service operation. I would like to bring up a couple of concerns that our commissioner and our food safety people have brought up. I don't know how the Ohio Department of Health feels about it yet, or if they've been involved, but I would like to point out just a few basic things. From our perspective, or I'll say from my perspective, what we are looking at with this proposed change is a complete revamping of how hydromechanical grease interceptors are sized. Okay, so the ratings, the A1, 12, 14.3, and 14.4 are the standards that these hydromechanical grease interceptors are required to be designed and tested to. And up until this particular code change, the way that these are sized is completely on GPM or flow rate. So these interceptors were designed and tested to a certain flow rate. They operate differently than gravity interceptors because they have a particular scientific method, if you will, mechanical method of separating the grease from the waste flow. The flow control fitting actually introduces air into the stream. Triangulation of that effluent happens. Grease rises to the top. The water flows to the bottom. It's a very, I would say scientific, but mechanically designed system that has to meet that standard. So what this does, this proposed change, is that it kind of introduces a whole new concept. I understand, I think, why it was introduced, but the concept is this, is that we're not only going to use the flow rate now for the sizing of these interceptors, we're going to use an arbitrary figure that we're going to call fat content or grease content, and we're going to base it on another thing that we're going to call meals, meals per day. And this is where public health had to really kind of just raise our hands and say, wait, do you know what you're doing here? Because what we're seeing here is that meals per day sounds like a very reasonable thing. If we look at the definitions here of what convenience store is, hotel breakfast bars, it goes into fast food and quick service and full service restaurants. And it gives us an indication of what the industry, if you will, has said, that this is the average number of meals per day. And as you can see, like, for example, on the fast food, it talks about 40 meals a day, but you have to actually calculate it by the number of hours that it's open. So it becomes a number that seems reasonable. But here's what's not reasonable, and what we wanted to just talk about, or at least bring into the conversation, is that there is no definition about what constitutes a meal. Okay, so we have to really kind of think about what we're doing here. So if we say that the convenience store is allowed 1,000 meals per day, do we really know what is a meal? Is it a hot dog? Is it the chili fries? Is it that little thing that's been sitting on the roller for 2.5 days? We don't know. We don't really know what a meal is because it's not defined. So from a public health perspective, we would like to just throw it out there for your consideration that the very first thing that we should do to make this particular code proposal have meaning and substance is to define what a meal is. Okay, so the definition of what is a meal. Now, the second thing that we get into, and as we move into the table, is a little bit, well, it's kind of scary. So when we look at the table that's being proposed, 1003.3.8, we see that this proposal now is adding another dimension. So basically what's going to happen is that at the end of the day, somebody is going to have to determine what the peak flow rate is, the calculated peak flow rate. So we still kind of keep that GPM calculation in play, but now we're going to multiply it in a formula that is based on this new table. Because what the table is trying to do from our perspective and in our opinion is to say that certain things will always be true. Let me give you an example. On the elementary cafeteria, oh my God, the memories, right? Well, at the end of the day, this establishment is being considered a low grease producer. But from a public health and a food safety perspective, we know that's quite the opposite. The school cafeterias are at the very least high grease producing situations because of what's served. So basically, before I get too much into what I'm about to say, I want to actually list what the registered environmental health sanitarians, or specialists is what they're called now, wanted to point out in this particular list, and I think it will help make more sense about what I'm going to say. So number one, their greatest concern is that there's no definition of what constitutes a meal. How are meals per day being determined? So when we go back to that definition and say, well, fast food restaurants are 40 meals a day times the number of hours we're open, how are the meals per day being determined? And the reason this is important is that some fast food or quick service facilities sell more meals than full restaurants. I can give many different examples, but I live in the Pickerington area. AJ Wingburger would be considered a fast food, but it by no means has the amount of service that a McDonald's would, or, whatever, an Arby's, wherever you like to go. they cannot be considered the same thing because the volume of what they do is so different. But yet what this chart does is it puts a number to a thing, okay? And it puts it to the fast food, or it puts it to the, what they call full fare here, which is going to be another point that we need to bring up. Table 103.3.8 gives examples that are not reliable. Again, this is just from a public health perspective, from our opinion. Food processes, menus, and grease produced is subject to change in many facilities. I would like to point your attention to, well, let's just pick one. Low grease producing facility could be considered what they're calling a deli / sub shop. Okay. Now the deli / sub shop, according to this, is a low grease producer, but not all sub shops are created, or deli shops are created equal, are they? So you have the small mom and pops, and they might do whatever they do. There's one in Pickerington that just is, they make some of the best sandwiches around, but they don't make a lot of meals. They're a small little organization. You can go to Jersey Mike's and they're cooking Philly cheesesteak sandwiches for you now. And that would be considered a low grease producer. It doesn't make any sense. So we have to be careful about the examples that we are putting into this table because they are arbitrary and what they're just categorized questionably according to what the food safety people are saying. For example, elementary cafeterias who prepare many different types of grease-laden foods daily are categorized as a low grease producer, while convenience stores who typically produce very little to no grease are categorized as medium grease producers. And this is from actual experience of however many years sanitarians have been around, because we see what happens in the convenience stores. We know the types of foods that are served there. And to say that it is more of a grease producer than what a cafeteria, elementary cafeteria, we don't even know if that applies to all school cafeterias or not.
I don't want to interrupt, but I have a question for you.
Yeah.
And my guess is, like I said, the others that I think are here have everything sharing some of your concerns. But I do want to let you know that the code committee did have this exact conversation about the examples. My question to you is you believe it's possible to give appropriate examples? I know you're questioning the categories here. Do you think it's possible to have examples that these need to be shifted around based off obviously input, or do you think you can't really quantify it based off of how they defined it?
We think it can be better. Yeah. We think it can be better.
So you do think it's possible and just be approved upon, you don't? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And so there's several different, go ahead.
Or related to that, if that last column as examples is more commentary, not really enforceable language, and would you have disagreement with the restaurant type being described as low, medium, high, and very high with those grease production values?
We think that's the way it should go.
You know, so the first two columns is pretty solid.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The last column is where the issue is, in that it may get misused.
It will be misused. Okay, so
yeah.
I'm just letting you know because we inspect these restaurants every day. And what you're going to see, for example, is that somebody's going to argue with you that, well, you put Indian cuisine here. What the hell is that? I'm sorry, what the heck is that? I mean, is it a full service restaurant? Right. Is it a full service restaurant, or are we saying it's more fast food? We're not really sure what we're talking about.
Okay.
So
Like I said, the code committee did have this very similar conversation.
So from the public health perspective, what we were saying on this is that if there was something in the example aisle, it should be a defined term. You added a couple of different definitions in this cycle. You defined fast food, quick service. You defined full service. So the one way that we would think that it can become more relevant would be to say that whatever is in an example should be a defined term. Because you don't want to argue about words, about whether it really is a deli shop or whether it's.
Because the important part is how much grease is being produced.
Right, and that's the other thing. Now, that I know has industry support, and when I say industry, the manufacturers, everybody had a chance in the IPC process to give testimony to say, hey, this will or won't work. We believe we understand what is being attempted here, because sometimes there are operators, food service establishments that might not produce the kind of grease.
That was going to be my next question is, so there, you do think that there is some potential of, as we were talking about, to eliminate design, if you're just based off of like, the standard, that with the average flow, right?
Right.
And so you could benefit, certain establishments kind of benefit, be able to have.
Yes, you could.
Yeah. And I think so it's probably what they're trying to get to be a little bit more targeted rather than a standard.
Right. And we support that. It's just that the way the table is shown now, you're going to have endless arguments about what kind of food service establishment. The other thing that you could do would be to base the examples on risk levels. And as you know, ODH has risk levels for all different food service establishments. And that risk level actually, it indicates what kind of food service operation it is. So if it was something that was just on a paper plate and it was like little grease or whatever the packaging, and it might be a lower level risk.
When you indicate you're going to send us some written
Yes.
documents, can you include those risk levels for ODH's risk?
Absolutely.
Implementation?
Because they're very relevant to this.
Yeah, yes.
And I think that you would be better apt to link the low grease, medium grease, high grease based on the risk level more than you could by trying to use examples that really are subjective.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of different things going on. And what you didn't have there was maybe smoothie shops. Those are a big thing right now.
Mhm.
So there's all sorts of different things, but what we can do is say that risk levels would absolutely give you that kind of direction.
I can tell you that one of the written comments we received was there was a suggestion that the board convene like kind of a working group. And so that might be something that the code committee consider, especially as they're taking all the comments in. So that would be helpful.
Yeah, we'd love to be a part of anything.
Do you have any other specifics before I hand it over to, because I want to make sure others have an opportunity, but a lot of them have already shared.
I think that I will leave it at that because the main issue, the main, rising of the hair on the back of the neck was really about a couple of things: defining the meal.
Okay.
What is a meal? And also trying to get those very subjective examples out of that table and maybe base it on something that is either defined or a risk level. So that would be about it. And I thank everybody for your time. It's a big deal. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Yep.
We have Coda and then we have a question chat.
Yeah,
Coda?
thank you. Brian.
More of a general question than a comment. What would
Sorry,
Franklin
No. Go ahead. Sorry.
County, I've stayed relatively quiet today. What would Franklin County think of having that examples column dropped entirely?
Right.
We would think that it would make sense, but again, only from from the perspective that what it is right now is going to not allow you to be able to really apply certain things. You're going to argue about the names is what you're going to do. And somebody's going to say, well, this Indian cuisine restaurant's medium, but really it's a full fare restaurant. It's more like a high grease producer. And so that's where we say either drop it, use something that's a defined term, or use a risk level. Because risk levels actually do tell you what kind of food service operation you have. And if you're like not serving foods, it's a lower risk level. By the time you get to the full fare restaurant, you're at the highest level. And those are treated differently, right? Because the food service operation is different. But the other big thing Coda, would be that we have to define what the meal is too. Because people are going to argue about that too.
I don't
Yeah.
disagree with that. I would assume that this comment is probably going to chug its way, or the change is probably going to chug its way through. That's why I was asking if examples got struck, if that would make it at least more workable. And that would at least address my primary comment that I had when it come to code committee originally.
I know,
Mike,
Mike had posted comments earlier in case he had to step away. It looks like he's back. Mike, did you want to add anything to your comments you posted?
yeah, added that one about the coffee shops there, but
Yeah, he may not be able to.
He's in the field, so he's.
Yeah, he may not be able
That's not free to be a chat.
I just want to make sure that we just note that he did add these written
Yes,
comments.
The typed comment he had in doesn't seem to have anything
letter is-
materially different.
Oh, yeah.
it says,
But he did ask whether Plumbing and Draining Institute has participated. I have not received comments from them. And he's also referencing UPC. Thank you, Mike. We will review your written comments that you posted, and I know you're you're adding more here.
he said the letter is pretty thorough there.
Okay. Appreciate it. I think those are the individuals that signed up to speak on this. Is there anyone else that had one comments on the grease interceptor issue before we move on to the other provisions in the plumbing code? Okay. Appreciate all the feedback.
Thank you.
Where we can do the.
So 3.8 talks about calculating fats, oils, and grease discharge per meal. 3.9 is a new section that talks about the service.
We're still in 10?
Yeah. Sorry.
Need to jump back.
No, I was going to finish
Is that chapter 10?
chapter 10 and the grease interceptors. So we get the full picture.
Yep.
So 3.8 is that. 3.9 is about the design service interval. So that impacts how large the grease interceptor is based on how committed they are to keeping it clean. 3.10 is about calculating the flow rates, hydromechanical and gravity. So that brings in some of our defined terms. And then 3.11 is there's a whole group of ones about dealing flow rates based on sink volumes and what's discharging into it. 3.11 is grease interceptor sizing. So based on all this information that you've calculated about how much grease you're producing and what the flow is, you get to size your grease interceptors. And we have sizing for gravity and we have sizing for hydromechanical, which I think this was brought up by Brian earlier about the standards.
Right.
And then 1003.9 and 1003.10, they were renumbered and relocated. So no new content there. So that I didn't have anything of significance identified. I suppose we could mention that in 610.1 is where the testing.
Yeah, we need to talk about that because I have written comments submitted related to that as well. And I believe there might be someone online that wants to address it.
Okay. Six 10.1.
Talk about water power sumps.
I wasn't going to talk about water powered sumps. Are addressed in a couple of different ways. One is taking out this exception that a water-powered sump is in the list of devices that are I forget what that one was. It had to do with protecting the potable water supply. And then we had some other ones. Yeah, there that it so 608.17 it has to be protected with backflow and backflow prevention devices. 610 is about basically adding in the bacteriological examination to include some specific bacteria to test for MMO, MUG, and Legionella bacteria. And that was the major add in there.
There, I do have a written comment indicating that the PHCC does have concerns related to this. While they support it in general, they feel like that it has practical implications and concerns and doesn't establish approved sampling protocols, acceptable laboratory methods, pass-fail criteria, required sampling locations, required number of samples, procedures for retesting, responsibility for corrective action or contractor closeout requirements following project completion. So they have just concerns about how this would be implemented, it sounds like, from a contractor perspective. Is there any comments from online or Brian on Legionella, this section? Is that the plumbing code?
I believe that's the major things in the plumbing code. The other things I think are really just clarification items and.
Before we leave the plumbing code, move on to the residential code, just one last time, any additional comments from Brian or any?
Well, I did have one question, and I don't know if you have knowledge of this, but I was speaking with Jim Richardson the other day regarding the vacuum testing issue found in section 312.
Okay.
And he is actually introducing a proposal that I did not see on this list, and I just wondered if maybe I should get back with him. I thought that this was being introduced in this cycle, but what you show here is the only thing that is moving forward, right?
Jim had submitted several petitions to us. He withdrew several of them. None of them were related to vacuum testing, though.
Okay.
So he might still be working on it. I got the sense that, the ones that he withdrew, he was going to go back to keep working on, come back to us. So it might be part of what he's bringing back.
It was something that made it through the IPC committee.
Okay.
And it's actually kind of clarifying what inches of mercury would be required.
That's my recollection, correct, is that none of his petitions included, or am I mistaken?
I don't remember any that were there, but I can.
It's like I said, so I got this impression that he was going to come back with some things that he keep work on. So it'll probably he wants to keep working on that one, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone online on any additional comments on the public code before we move on? Okay. The Residential Code of Ohio. So many of you are probably aware that we are still on the 2018 IRC. We have been reviewing the 2024 IRC with the RCAC, and that work continues. However, we do, as a state agency, have an obligation to keep our rules up to date and file with JCAR every 5 years. We are beyond that time frame, and so we are doing this interim package to just make amendments, some select amendments to the IRC, to the RCO, still based off of the 2018 IRC, while we continue to work on the 2024 IRC review. So this is not intended to be a complete code update or anything like that, which we would kind of expect at this point. That will be coming later, but I just want to give some background that they're still continuing work on the 2024 IRC. I am going to instead of the rule that was sent out when it comes to chapter 1 of the RCO, I'm going to share, I'm going to have to, a marked up version because it's just so much easier to kind of see the changes that way. And, but so it will look different than what you would have reviewed that went out to stakeholders. So much of what's in chapter 1 changes is incorporating the changes that the board made to chapter 1 of the Ohio Building Code in the 2024 edition. So it's just coordinating language, and there are some differences, and I'm going to highlight them as we go through here. And feel free to jump in, Jay, if I miss something. This is just a correction to a title, updating it, the current terminology. We are proposing to exempt tents from regulation. This is only in our 4, 1, 2, and 3 family tents associated, installed associated with a 1, 2, and 3 family dwelling. They're still regulated under the Ohio Building Code, but we're proposing to eliminate from the scope of the residential code.
And it's specific to temporary use.
Yes.
So if it's going to be up for temporary purposes.
And then also, we're just clarifying that time limited occupancies, we just don't believe that that concept is applicable within the RCO, and it's just a commercial code concept. At the last budget bill, the General Assembly adopted statutory changes to allow a certified residential building department to be certified for new construction only. They can be certified for new construction or new construction and alterations. So this provision is the chart to implement that guidance. And the idea is that there are communities in the state that we hope will consider getting certified to enforce the residential code if they can just do it for new construction, to encourage more departments to at least regulate for when they're getting new fit single family homes in their community. But all existing residential departments that were certified prior to this change are automatically certified for new construction and alterations, just like they historically had been. And a jurisdiction would have to apply to the board to have that modified. This is bringing over references to other state agencies that may have oversight, that this is language that's also in the building code. Coordinating some changes, cleanup that we made in the building code here for references to reference codes and standards. Same language, coordinating language with building code. Do you want to talk about tents? Temporary structures.
Yes. So we have a memo out dealing with temporary structures and tents, and there's some organization there. We tried to clean up the path between the building code and the fire code. A lot of the temporary tent stuff is now over in the fire code, and you really have to go over there to get the regulation on tents, membrane structures, temporary, and in specifically the temporary structures that are regulated. So we've eliminated a number of them out of 101.2 that aren't regulated, but there's still the possibility that you could end up with a temporary structure other than a tent that gets regulated.
A clarification for non-required work. So that's when it's installed and just a reference to the relevant sections. Temporary structures. Already mentioned that.
And we're making reference to the size, the minimum size.
Again, adding the provisions for alterations. So to clarify that this would, how this would come into play for jurisdictions that are certified for new construction and alterations. Just like we did in the section 104 of the Ohio Building Code, we're removing the duties and responsibilities for certified residential building departments and just now referencing over to our certification rules that are also being worked on currently, and we have a public hearing scheduled here in August on some proposed changes to certification rules. Changes to the approval section. Again, this is the same changes we made in the building code. We eliminated this non-conformance approval option just because it caused a lot of confusion in its application. Again, just clarifying how timeframes are, again, consistent with changes we made in the building code. Eliminating references, clarifying what should be in a certificate of plan approval, kind of eliminating some outdated language. Clarifying coordinating language. Same changes we made in the building code. Now that we have in freestanding industrialized unit rules, just like we did in the building code, we're removing provisions for industrialized units out of the building code and just relying more, or out of building codes and relying on their industrialized unit rules. As we mentioned earlier with the chapter 1 of the building code, we are continuing working on 1065 when it comes to compliance by alternative design. As we already mentioned, expect to see some additional changes that will be incorporated in this section when you see these rules come back out again for further review. And same thing there. Clarifying language. Yeah. All coordinating with changes we made in the building code. This is order of plan review is something that we did in the building code. And this is something I want to make sure the residential building departments are aware of because you may not have been able to take advantage of it yet. This language allows jurisdictions to establish a policy to have different queues for plan review. Before we used to say, you know, first in, first out. But then you would call us and we would say, you know, informally, no, if you actually have a policy in place where you establish different queues, as long as everyone is treated the same once they're in those queues, then you're meeting the intent of our rules, but our rules never actually said that. So again, this is a way for you to help manage, not let a small project get hung up just because you have a large project in front of it. And just make sure if you have that policy, it's published and everyone is aware of it. And then again, no one is being, advantaged from anyone else when they're submitting documents. Cleanup, removing regulatory restrictions. Removing regulatory restrictions.
Pretty much all 108.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we're limiting language. Same thing with limiting language related to industrialized units. Recognizing that you may be using electronic means for communicating, kind of modernizing some of the language that for chapter 1 of how you communicate with owners. These are changes we already made in the commercial building code. Same thing with electronic communications. Clarifying 4 days inspections. The changes to orders, same changes that we made, kind of just more updating, no intent of how it's to be applied, just kind of updating some language, eliminating some redundancies. One thing we added here when it comes to, and this is, I know it's standard practice, we know that jurisdictions are often citing to their own ordinances for penalties. You know, when it comes to the building codes enforcement, our oversight and our intent is we oversee all the way up to the building official issuing an order. How that order is prosecuted is we expect that it will be determined by working with your legal counsels for enforcement. So I wanted to make sure it was clear that, you know, once you issue an order in the building codes, that, you know, how it's prosecuted could potentially have a local process. updating certificate of occupancy and adding certificate of completion. This is something I think we just overlooked previously in the RCO. It needed to be coordinated with the building code. Limited time, limited occupancy, as we already discussed. So you see a vote for existing buildings. Getting and eliminating changes to the code and just having a more simplified language of what the process is today. We don't require you to submit, I think, 8 hard copies of the petitions any longer.
Yeah.
Just updating a little bit the existing building section, renumbering. And as we indicated earlier, we are working on kind of simplifying section 104, also in chapter 1 of the RCO. And so again, expect to see some proposed changes to this section the next time you see these rules out for review.
114.
Okay, I'm sorry, 114. So that is chapter 1, and I'm going to then hand it over to Jay to the substantive provisions of the RCO, unless someone has questions for the administrative process.
Okay. Definitions, chapter 2. Oh, you got to go back to the. So we have a number of new definitions, and these are tied to changes where we've added things. For example, the big picture is we propose to adopt a couple of appendices from the IRC into the RCO for accessory dwelling units, for
Went ahead too far ahead.
tiny homes, and for patio covers. So there's some definitions that have to come in there. Accessory dwelling unit is one of them. So an ADU. And there was Jeremy had a question about ADUs.
I don't know if he wants to talk about it now or when we're in this.
He's raised his hand. So go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, I just had one question about this definition. It mentions additions and alterations, but that also says detached structure. So can they be built like from scratch as like a new building, or does it have to be as like an alteration to the primary?
So it can be a standalone building. The thing about an ADU, when you get into the provisions, is it is subordinate to a primary dwelling unit. So it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It doesn't exist on a lot all by itself, but it can be detached from the primary dwelling unit on the lot.
I think his question, though, is we say an additional alteration.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's implying it's to the primary when it's not. This is an independent dwelling. Do you think that is causing some?
You cannot build an ADU without a dwelling
I understand.
unit. So
I think he's talking about the confusion between an addition is attached and an alteration is a part of it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what
that was just the verbiage.
Or in a detached structure.
Yeah, I get the confusion.
It's just on the
I
same.
understand that since it can be on the same lot and can be, like it has to be secondary to the primary. That makes sense.
Yes.
But there's just inside of that definition is just a little verbiage confusion.
Yeah.
And so Jay said it's highlighting, or in a detached structure. So the first half is all about the primary, and it just so maybe flip it so it's clearer. I mean, maybe it's buried something. I know Ahmed has his hand raised too. I appreciate that comment because I understand why he was reading it that way.
Yeah, Ahmed.
Thank you, Jim. My comments are in the same vein because we do see detached ADUs a lot, and where it gets more involved is that usually if it detached ADU is in a alley in the back of the property, and there's separate utilities because the fire department doesn't want to have to run to the house to shut off gas. if the ADU is on the alley, for example. So a detached structure is a lot more involved, and we typically look at that as a separate building because it's not an addition or an alteration. And, I think Regina mentioned something about switching the language. So just food for thought.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, I think, would you think that would provide a little more clarity, Amit, to just maybe flipping it, just since it's maybe buried this way, is clear to make
Yes,
it
and
detached.
So it can be a detached, so start with, it can be a detached structure or an addition
Yeah.
or alteration. But it is, either way, it's subordinate to the dwelling unit on the same
Yes.
lot.
I think
and-
maybe a little
yes,
strong.
it's not the primary structure.
Yeah.
That's understood. But a detached structure has some complexity of its own in terms of utilities and locations, so forth.
Right.
So Pete has a chat question that I think maybe builds on that.
So is there a size limit on an ADU, and how is subordinate defined?
We do not have a size limit on an ADU, I don't believe, because it's essentially another dwelling unit that's part of the primary.
So could someone have a 1,000 square foot primary dwelling and then build a 5,000 square foot accessory dwelling unit?
I believe there's some language that
Yeah, maybe
that controls that.
Pete, we'll come back to you when we're actually in chapter 3. Maybe the specific provisions for ADUs might address that, but we'll make sure we revisit that question.
Yeah.
Definitions.
Yeah. So again, we brought in boathouse and boat well into the RCO because there are boathouses that are 1, 2, and 3. And they get additional requirements similar to what we saw in the OBC, but they're specific to RCO. We need those definitions. Then egress roof is the next definition. Egress roof access window, which is part of the tiny house appendix that's been adopted into the code language. So it's allowing these types of elements to serve as that emergency escape and rescue opening. We added flood and flooding. That's part of the basement, the allowance for jurisdictions that are establishing significant flooding in an area to be able to provide some additional requirements for the houses in those areas. We had to bring in flood and flooding as definitions. Landing platform. This again is part of the tiny house appendix that was brought in, and it deals with accessing a loft and not having the clear height at the landing platform on the stair. Brought in a definition of loft, again, for the tiny home appendice. And then we brought patio cover as what that is, that then triggers the language from that appendice that was brought in. Technically infeasible was a leftover code change that we had failed to bring in relative to accessibility, and we have that definition in now, or proposing to bring it in. And then finally, tiny house, essentially dwelling units less than 400 square feet in area, excluding the loft space. That's it for definitions. Chapter 3. 301.2.4.2, that's just leftover stuff from the flooding issue.
I mean, what was it again?
301.2.4.2. right there. And this is about the supplemental drainage that jurisdictions are allowed to require if they identify a zone that has flooding and flooding issues. 302.1, I think that's Charles's petition where we just the reference in the table.
Okay. Correcting a reference.
Yeah, correcting a reference in the table, 703.2. 302.6.1, this is the first part on the separation for the boathouse assembly. So this is where if they do have a boathouse that is a residential part of a residential building, they have this separation requirement to separate essentially the boat well from the dwelling unit portion. Okay, 311.8.1. Again, this is using the it's for slopes on ramps, and it's part of accessibility and references, and brings in 311.8.1 and brings in the technically feasible language. So essentially, persons that are in hospice who are going back to their home for hospice care and they need a ramp installed in their garage to gain access to their house don't have to go through an appeals process upon which they might die while they're waiting for approval. They can get maybe some access to their home. 314.1.1 and 1.2. This is the smoke alarm changes where we're referencing the new standard, and sorry, Regina, I'm moving. So we're eliminating the separate technologies requirement, and we're still referencing UL 217, and when you go to chapter 44, you'll see that 217 is the updated standard. 314.8. This is more boathouse, and this is where we bring forth that in the boat well, they have to have the heat detection in the boat well. 320 is more accessibility language dealing with the ramp. 320.1 about technical and feasibility. We understand that this is dealing specifically in existing buildings, not in new construction, but we felt it was a good place to park the requirement. 322.2.5 again is supplemental drainage, coordinating with the other supplemental drainage requirements, and it allows jurisdictions to establish those locations. 329, 330, 331, those are all sections generated to address tiny homes, ADUs, and patio covers. So this is where we have adopted the provisions from the appendice. The tiny home is basically providing relief from other technical requirements in the RCO when you have a tiny home. These are the most common non-compliance issues that orders get written on where they would have to appeal them. This allows them to do them prescriptively if they have a tiny home. So if you're dealing with a dwelling unit less than 400 square feet, make sure you take a look at these provisions to see if any of them are applicable to the design at hand. 330 is the accessory dwelling unit, which I think we might want to try and answer some of Pete's questions. So in the ADU, there's some prohibited conditions. I'm not seeing size yet. ADU is secondary in size and function to the primary dwelling unit and shall comply with all of the following: not less than 190 and not more than 50% of the area of the primary dwelling and not more than 1,200 square feet in area. So it does have a minimum, it has a relative, and it has a maximum size.
Jeremy has his hand up.
Yeah, Jeremy.
Yeah, had some questions on some of these conditions and just other verbiage things. Like item 1 or condition 1 mentions townhouse unit, which does not have a definition. And I think the definition was removed in the RCO, but it is in the IRC, has a definition. And so I don't know what the best way to handle that would be, because it says existing single-family detached dwelling or within an existing townhouse unit. And so without the definition, it's hard to see where that would be, where that would fall.
Yeah, Jeremy, thanks for catching that. You're right. That was just a IRC term that we missed in coordinating with the existing RCO terminology. So
Yeah. If I had to guess, I would guess we would probably eliminate that phrase, that it'll just deal with dwelling units.
In detached single-family dwelling units or just dwelling units?
It'll be dwelling units.
Okay. And then I think the other question we had on these conditions was from number 6, condition 6, where it mentions you have to have a separate entrance serving that, serving the ADU and the primary, or it can have a common hallway located within the building. And we were curious if that needed the same separation as the ADU does, or if it's, or how that is being treated as shared egress and not going to the building code. And so we were just curious about that.
I think that's a good question. I think we're going to make a note of that and do some research of what we think, if we need to provide better clarification on it. You got that, Jay? I appreciate the feedback. As you know, ADUs are a new concept for us and stuff, and even though it's been sitting in the appendix for a while, it's good to hear how this might, the questions that might arise.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be, I think the basis of Jeremy's question is, does it change the nature of the
I
building?
know that's what we need to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that it,
Jeremy?
Jeremy? Or did you have more?
For the conditions, yes, I think we had another question for 0.5, but we can wait on that one.
You can go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm curious about, because I was wanting to get some feedback on the sizing from not only yourself, but maybe others that have seen these. I'm just curious about what the size limitations, whether that was fit on what you guys are seeing as ADUs, or some feedback on that. And then obviously you have a question.
Yeah. Usually, I would say that that's pretty standard. A lot of the time, like Amit was saying, we see them as in the rear of the lot, facing an alley, on like maybe the second floor of a garage, a detached garage. And so that sizing is pretty standard.
And then you had a question about it, or?
Yes, sorry. 330.5, where it mentions ADUs adjoining the primary. Sorry, yeah, that's what I was like. It was a little later on. That mentions ADUs adjoining the primary dwelling. But earlier in the section, it mentions adjoining and within. And so I was curious, if you have an ADU within, is the rating required between the ADU and the primary?
I would, this is where I think staff and probably needs to sit down and talk more about, I mean, is this operating as another dwelling unit, or not? And yeah.
Because we had some other smaller stuff, but I wanted to roll it into that. It's like, if you add an ADU, is it treated as
I know.
an additional
Mhm.
dwelling units, like for a number
Yeah.
of units? And if
Yeah.
it's like if you're using multifamily alternative compliance, can you put it in? And then does the rating, the 1-2 alternating rating change, and just stuff like that?
Historically, at least from my perspective, we would have treated the ADU just as another dwelling unit and not had, you apply all the rules like you normally would. Now we have an ADU, and is it in fact different than a dwelling unit, and where are the benefits? So
Yeah, that
all
was
good
the
questions.
crux of our big question.
Yeah.
All good questions to ask.
Been handling it up until now in Columbus. Were you guys treating them as separate dwelling units? And then
We
with all
were.
the separation, just as Jay indicated, yeah. And the thing is the idea of these provisions and bringing these in is, I think, to provide some relief to those requirements. And I think that's why we need to talk about to where that may be appropriate. And certainly
Sounds
any additional feedback and I know Amit's got his hands raised in that those of you that are seeing these, I would definitely like, your input on that.
I'll let Amma speak on that.
Thanks. I was just asking because I dealt with this not too long ago. On West Broad Street, you have Jeremy and you folks talked about townhouses. These are row houses, but there was a fire. They created these units in the basements, and not with permits or what have you. And the bigger question is, let's say it's 3 row houses and they have 3 dwelling units in the basement. Is this a 6-family or a 3-family? Which code applies?
Foundationally, the same question. Yes.
Yes, and then
I don't have, yeah.
Could we somewhere along the line address the utilities? Does the ADU need its own utility? Because that's a concern by the fire department, is where do we go to, if the unit's juiced up and we have to go there, where do we find the shutoffs?
Yeah, but he has a
Yeah.
similar question too. I mean,
These are good questions.
Yeah, they're all good questions. What's running through my mind, and not that this is the answer, but in some ways an ADU is much more like a sleeping unit that has separate control, but it's part of a larger building versus its own separate dwelling unit with that can operate independently of the other one. So that's just where my mind is right now thinking about it. Not saying that that's the answer to the questions, but I think they're all good questions.
so with that thinking, to Pete's question, that means that there would be no prohibition that they could be, the utilities could be served from the primary.
I think that is foundational in the subordinate
Exactly.
requirement, is that they're getting their utilities from the building. The building is getting its utilities from the utility purveyor.
It's dependent upon the primary.
Yes.
Right.
Now, when you call it a dwelling unit, they can cook, they can,
Yes.
Cooking, living, sleeping, and sanitation, they provide all those means.
Yes.
So, if we accept that 50% of the residential fires happen in the kitchen, you've created another point of ignition. There's another kitchen.
Yes.
And if we don't address how, and what we see is attics and basements, very common. They create additional dwelling units to be occupied by somebody else.
Yeah. But it's not, it's not occupied in the same way that a separate dwelling unit that we've historically dealt with. This is an accessory dwelling unit. So we have to address how it is subordinate to the primary dwelling unit. So it's, yeah, they're all very good, again, all very good questions, but if they are doing historically what we've always done, where they're just making it additional dwelling units, they're taking a single family and making a two family, taking a two family, making a three family. This doesn't, I say this doesn't apply. And if they want to provide separate utility for all those dwelling units and make them a three family building, then you go somewhere else. Not
Maybe
here.
that needs to be clarified
I
because
think that's the point, yeah.
the student housing folks will use this.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And that may be part of going back up to the first question that I think Jeremy had about single family dwelling, that maybe it can only apply to a single family dwelling and you can only get one ADU. And that's where I've heard the most examples given in those jurisdictions that make real good use of ADUs are places like San Francisco or in Los Angeles and places like that where they have a single family home and they want to take care of their grandparents but they don't want them in a room or space. They're back there. Anyway.
But I guess to the point is, and I think that's a good question, is what's the line between becoming a 1 to 2 family dwelling versus a single family dwelling with an ADU?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good question, Amit. And we're gonna keep working on that and
we can get that clarified within the ADU.
Yeah.
And it may just be the language, how we understand all the language.
Yeah. Exactly. Amit, before we leave this, you mentioned, I know Pete had his question about utilities, but and his was whether it could be served from the primary. Did you have a separate point as far as even utility placement that you would want us to consider?
It probably, thank you, Regina. That's a very good question. The fire department just wants to know where to go to turn off the power, electric or the gas to the building so that they don't walk into a unit that has electric or gas. I haven't given it much thought, but I do know that this has become an issue, like the building on West Broad, that became a big issue when the fire happened. And the shared egress becomes the other issue. If you go into the same hallway and then you go down a set of steps and go to the basement and there is no separation, that becomes a fire safety issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that goes to Jeremy's question on 330.5.
Yes.
That 1 hour separation, that is a pretty typical separation for a sleeping unit. So if you're all within, and that's what kind of sends me down that path is you still need to separate that if it's within the unit. But again, we'll all need to talk about that and kind of get some more clarity there. It'll come as a whole hopefully come as a whole coordinated package.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we appreciate the input. Before we leave ADOs, is there anything else we should take back to look at? Okay, great. Patio covers.
Patio covers. This is Bruce's.
Bruce's baby.
He wanted to see patio covers as its own section. So, and it made sense.
Yeah.
To bring bring forth patio covers.
I'm guessing patio covers is not controversial as ADU.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I would hope not.
Okay.
There's, Charles pointed out that we inadvertently brought forward a change in chapter 4 that we'd already made in the previous amendments group. So we will be cleaning that up. That's relative to frost protection on the smaller accessory structures. With that, the only change we have is in 405.3, and that again is supplemental drainage associated with those flooding areas. So that completes that package.
Yeah, so
Then chapters 5 through.
let me catch up with you.
Sure.
405 was the supplemental.
405.3. Yeah.
Big chapter. I think.
Yeah.
Let's scroll on.
Lots of tables.
Skipped over.
Yeah. There it is. So that's the local supplemental drainage, and that's the foundation drains. So that completes that package. Chapters 5 through 13 are no change chapters. So we have to do that for 5-year rule review, but there's no new changes. So there's nothing to look at. Chapter 14 is updating some reference standards. This is a response to a petition.
And these are changes we already made in the building code, right?
Yes. Chapters 15 through 24 are no change rules. And then that gets us to chapter 25. So now the concept here, chapter 25 is plumbing. Typically what you'd see here is reference to the 2024 Ohio Plumbing Code as the enforceable document, and any modifications that we're making to that OPC, those OPC requirements that are pertinent to residential buildings, typically showed up in chapter 25. Because we are opening another option for building owners to comply with the RCO, we are proposing to include all of the plumbing chapters from the IRC in the RCO. And it starts here in chapter 25 that they have an option described there in 2501.1.1 that they can pick to comply with either chapters 25 through 33 of the RCO, or they can do what they have historically done, is go to the Ohio Plumbing Code as referenced in chapter 44 and modified. We have those same modifications that you're used to seeing here in chapter 25. And we've made those same changes in the individual chapters where they appear in 25 through 33. So it's kind of the same requirements. One is more directed towards 1, 2, and 3 family dwellings and doesn't have a lot of the commercial provisions and stuff like that. The other one is historically what everybody's been used to
We want to
using.
have a simpler option for homeowners, which is, the residential code is intended to be more prescriptive, and it should be able to be used by a homeowner. But the intent is that the provisions should be applied the same regardless of whether they're IRC or RCO plumbing or using Ohio Plumbing Code as a reference. So we tried to make sure that those were bridged, any of those Ohioizations and everything. So regardless of which path. But they cannot mix and match. They're
Correct.
either in RCO plumbing and they stay in there, or they use the Ohio Plumbing Code and they stay in there.
Yeah.
And it's the same concept as when we give like energy code compliance options. Can't mix and match. Once you're in one path, you stay there. It's the same concept when we get over to the electrical code chapters as well. I think Charles had his hand up.
He does. Charles?
So I just put it in the chat, and Regina was just talking. Sounds like even though the IRC plumbing chapters that we're bringing into the RCO have have been tweaked to match OPC, and that you've done similar with the IRC electric chapters being brought into the RCO, matching the Ohioized NEC. So it
Yes.
almost sounds like it's a difference that makes no difference. You've worked hard to make the match.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
granted that, is there a requirement someplace for the construction documents to tell the building department which path they chose? Or are they so similar it doesn't make any difference?
Enforcement, it shouldn't make any difference, in my opinion. Much like, well, as Regina mentioned, this is very similar to the energy options that they have. And they should tell you which path they've picked.
They should, mainly more, again, in application, it's not, in practical application, it's not difference. And I think it matters if you need to issue a correctional letter, what are you going to be citing to? Are you going to be citing to the RCO, or are you going to cite to the Ohio plumbing code sections? And so I think that needs to be clarified from the beginning.
It would also be a flag to the plans examiner that if they've cited the OPC, they may be doing stuff that are not traditionally in a dwelling unit. And so that can signal.
Yeah. Yeah. So they should tell you out of chapter 1 which path they've chosen.
Coda?
So do we have language in RCO chapter 1 telling them that they need to declare which path, or don't we?
We do not have specific directive. It's the same, that they have to provide enough information for you to determine code compliance. So it's for all of it.
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
Oh, I guess that's feeding off Charles' point. The OEBC we have shall be selected by the applicant for a compliance path. Is that something that could be entertained for the residential code, or is that getting closer to prescribing drawing content?
We could make that. The intention was that the applicant picks the path. They have that choice, much like in energy, and we could change the charging language here in 2501.1.1 and correspondingly in the NEC that the applicant picks the path.
I think I think Carl's point, we maybe want to just say it in chapter 1, but construction job, because when we list out the different systems, we want to maybe just add that.
Yeah, general that applies to any.
Right. Yeah.
And here, if you think better clarification.
Yeah, we can make the language read the same in all those places where the applicant has the choice, so that it's consistent. Sure.
Jim's
I
got.
think, like Jim had said, jurisdiction could, but this would also give a little bit of weight if it needs to come up during plan review, just rather than every jurisdiction creating a policy.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all I was going to say, is that you could just have it on their application. They could choose which path they were going to apply under. But
pick a box.
Yeah. And I think that would cover it because that's going to be part of your records for the job anyway.
It would, I think, for different hat, but coming from permit techs and for building officials, that would be a lot of administrative work. Not necessarily a lot. It would be a lot of distributed administrative work for something that could come from the code and live in the code as a requirement.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're just going to continue to see, I mean, you expect that people are just going to be submitting under the plumbing code, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But
I think this is more to how we want our documents to be, user friendly for, the homeowner too.
Okay. So.
Those are.
Yeah. So those are the changes to the OPC.
They recognize why these rules look different too.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
So.
I like that.
Yeah. So the plumbing code chapters and the electric code chapters. So essentially 25 through 34. They are moving into the new format language since we're adopting new chapters, much like we did with the OBC in this code cycle, where the rules are just capturing the edits to the model code language. These chapters are just capturing the edits to the model code language. So if you want to see the whole rule and all the requirements, you kind of need to grab the IPC and make the amendments. You have to grab the IRC, I'm sorry, the IRC and look at the amendments you have for all those chapters. It will show up in the published version in a complete edited document. So from a user perspective, it's going to be a lot more clear than the rule. So we start in here by making the edits to the OPC, and then we have the edits to the various chapters of the IRC.
We're getting into.
That's electric.
Matter of point, I happen to agree with what Coda was saying. Putting that in administratively eliminates a lot of back and forth.
I think it's, Charles may be right. There probably is like a place where we may do this and elsewhere with other systems too in chapter 1. So, yeah.
So then 34, same concept as I described in the plumbing code in chapter 25. The owner, the applicant, is going to have a choice to comply with either chapters 34 through 43 of the RCO, or as they're used to, going to NFPA 70 and applying the edits that we provide later in this chapter to NFPA 70. We've taken those same edits and incorporated them into chapters 34 through 43.
And
I wanted to go, the plumbing, I wanted to point out in chapter, I was trying to remember where we brought forward the 312, and all the testing stuff. I can't remember.
we did bring over the Ohioization.
Yeah, we brought over those Ohioizations.
Yeah, it was, again, the RCO plumbing electrical are intended to be have the same standard. It's just you're in a different book. So if anyone online, or if you catch something where we missed something, please let us know.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's right in 25, but that just know that 312 is accounted for of the OPC.
In electrical, I know, I don't know if Mark's online with us. Coda, did you have something on plumbing before I talk about electrical, or?
No, it can fit anywhere. It's generally, is the intent in future to consider adopting the IRC with the residential provisions? Or is Ohio considering going back and bringing in plumbing provisions, or the residential plumbing, mechanical, and then electric provisions kind of back into a stripped down code?
I think that's what we're doing, isn't it?
We're doing now. In the future, we're going to do a straight adoption of the IRC.
Well, when we are, let's say with the 2024 IRC, when that review wraps up, and if it's determined to move forward with adoption, the intent would be that it would be adopted the same way the billing code was adopted, the 2021, incorporated by reference, and then list the changes. Yes. So remember, that's why all the other chapters other than plumbing and electrical look like they do today, full text of the rule, is because it's just an amendment to the code. It's an interim kind of until we actually move forward with a full code update. Is that what you're asking, Coda?
It is. I'm just considering the number of kind of Ohioizations that would happen, because right now this entire section is or plumbing, mechanical, and electric will be an Ohioization, but just to catch up.
I can tell you that when we were reviewing as we've been reviewing the 2024 IRC, we were keeping that in mind. Very similar when we were reviewing the 2021 IBC, we kind of really wanted to make sure that we prioritize the Ohioizations that had impact. And if it was just a pointer, if it really didn't have a substantive, then we probably let it go and we did not maintain that Ohioization. So the same way with when we're reviewing the 2024, we want to make sure that substantively, we want to make sure that this is a code that's right for Ohio. But we may let go some just like pointers, modification of terminology that may not actually have any substantive impact.
Thank you.
I know Mark, I don't know if Mark's online, but he did ask about the 2026 NEC. He was concerned about us working on electrical chapters and without considering 2026 NEC. I can tell you that we have not started reviewing the 2026. It is planned for the RCAC in the future. Again, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this is intended just to be an interim package until we start more substantive review with other, the newer edition of the IRC and potentially the newer edition of the NEC in the future.
And we're that interim step is allowing us to keep the same changes. No content is changing here. It's also allowing us to progress into the next protocol, which was what CODA was getting at.
Yeah.
And so doing a couple of things at administrative rule level, but we're not really changing the content.
And Charles, I know Charles was asking about the ICC publications. I mean, publication choices is up to ICC how they move forward. I can tell you that I'm encouraging building departments to take full advantage of the E-code pre-screen premium subscriptions that we've been providing to them for use and moving towards electronic versions rather than the hard copy books. You knew I was going to say that, Charles, right?
Do you hear, Charles?
No, he's probably busy doing something else.
Yeah.
Then
we're encouraging the use of the electronic or the digital codes. Published copies will be available for individuals to purchase if they want to, but
I don't know if it'll be as a full integrated document though. It'll tell you replacement pages potentially, but that's up to ICC and the publishers how they do that. And reference standards, are there things we want to highlight here before we wrap up?
Not a whole lot. Again, the change to the fire code, the plumbing code. We have added that we're kind of taking the plumbing code to the place where it was effective March 1st, including the amendments through October 15th of 2025. We're not adding this next package of stuff under the residential code.
It's just to have a moment in time. So when we update the plumbing code, it doesn't have automatic impact on 1, 2, and 3 family unless we separately amend it here.
Right. Again, we're updating 318 to the 2025 with code cases. We're updating UL 218 for smoke alarms, and we're updating UL 2200 on the emergency.
Like the shorter chapters.
Yeah.
Yeah. UL.
Yeah. 218.
I skipped over it.
Yeah. 218 or 217. Sorry. We'll update the date there. It should say 20. We have a technical issue there. We parked the 26, which was the revisions. The actual standard date is 20. I think it's 20.
So we need to correct that.
Yeah, we need to correct that. I already have it on my list.
See Charles' question about plumbing and electrical.
Correct.
Correct, Charles. 2018 IRC
Yeah, take a look at the beginning of, what is it? It would be chapter 34 and what's chapter 25?
25 is plumbing, 34 is electric.
Yeah, those beginning chapters, we reference specifically which, the incorporation by reference. So we say 2018 or do we do, okay, yeah.
But we probably don't in 25,
So we need to make
but we do up in chapter 1.
chapter, okay.
Yeah. And you changed up in the beginning of chapter 1 in the first section, you changed all the chapters to include those chapters of the IRC.
So I appreciate everyone that has stuck around. This was slightly longer than
Anticipated.
we covered a lot of content. And I appreciate especially, the conversations around ADUs, because that gave us some things to take a look at and consider. And just before we wrap up, does anyone have any final comments? Again, thank you. As I indicated, what we're going to do is we collect all this information. Then we'll share it with the code committee, and they'll probably take that into incorporate into some changes as a result, and then expect in the next month or so to see these rules come back out with additional modifications based off of these conversations. And we will, certainly welcome more comments in the future. So thank you all for participating today.
Thanks.
Nice. Tell you what, it really impacts you. You see it as you go through, how much work this agency has done to put all this.
Thank you.
And wow. Supposed to have lots of cookouts and beer drinking.